Hello, I'm Bill and welcome to Happy Vending. Today I'm going to show you how to change a Vend motor in a Dixie Narco stack machine. Happy Vending. So today I'm working on this Dixie Narco 276E machine. 276 because it holds 276 cans, E because it has an extended cabinet. These are what we call S2D machines. That means they work on a control board and they're multi-price machines as opposed to the older Dixie Narcos, which the Vend operation was controlled by the coin mech. Before I even work on this machine, since I'm working on the motors and electronics, I'm just going to unplug the machine for safety. Now here is the whole new Vend motor module that I ordered direct from Crane, which owns Dixie Narco now. Chances are, if you're having problems with your Vend motor in your machine, it probably is this Vend switch here, this Vend motor switch. These go bad probably more often than anything else as far as this module goes because the circuit board or the control board only sends 5-volt DC through this switch, and over time the contacts in there can't handle the small current of 5 volts and they go bad. And this part is only about $5. The whole module that I have here, which has the motor, the brake, the cam, as well as the switch and the bracket, this runs for about $95 brand new direct from Crane. I always like to keep one of these on hand in case I need to replace out a motor. I don't have time to troubleshoot what part is going bad. I just want to throw in the entire motor. I keep one of these. Now the motor that I'm replacing in there, sometimes it just doesn't spin, the motor doesn't spin completely through. It shows that there was a malfunction in the column, and then I have to take all the product out, and then when I close the door, the motor will home. So just by weight being on the rotor, it sort of stops the motor from going completely through the Vend. I think it's the Vend switch on the motor in there, but I don't have any extra Vend switches. I actually ordered some of these. I haven't gotten them yet. So once I take the motor out of there, I'm not going to just throw away the motor. I'll probably clean the brake. This is the brake up here, this piece. This stops the rotor from spinning very precisely, and it stops the rotor position from shifting when there's weight on the column by all the products. This is the actual motor itself. This is the cam, which stops in different positions depending on how many deep you have your product in there, 3 deep, 2 deep, 1 deep. You adjust this, and then like I said, this is the switch. So you have different parts. So the motor I take out of there, I'll clean it up, clean the brake, I'll replace the switch eventually, and maybe I'll do another video on that. Now I'm going to take out the product out of the column that I'm changing the motor in, which is column 7. It's the water column. You don't need to take out the product because there is a little stop on the rotor that it's going to stop it from completely falling down when you pull out the motor. But I'm going to do it anyhow, just so that I can spin that rotor if the motor doesn't line up in the exact position that the rotor is in right now. I might have to spin that rotor a little bit, and it's much easier to spin the rotor with the product out. This is not the ideal product to Vend in this machine because this is a 16-ounce consumer bottle. They're kind of squishy. So when you're putting these in your machine, especially these Dixie Narcos, don't stack them too high. Keep them low. They do create a lot of friction in there, and they are prone to jamming in the machine because of the squishiness of the bottle, but I don't stack them too high, and the motor still isn't properly vending them, and that's why I'm swapping out the motor. All right, so now I have the products empty. I'm going to take off this guard. You just pull these little tabs up and then pull it down. Make sure it doesn't snag onto any of the wires that go to the motors. So I have my 7 Vend motors here. The connectors that go to the motor itself, these top ones, they do carry 120 volts. It takes 120 volts to turn those motors. So you do have some high voltage up here if it were getting a signal from the control board to Vend. Down here on the switches, I told you that's only 5 volt DC going through them. And that's why these switches go bad more so than the other parts, because it's such a small amount of voltage that the contacts corrode a little bit and then it won't send the voltage through. So what we're gonna have to do is pull off all the wires going to this first motor. These are just connectors that pull straight up. And then you have on the bottom switch, it's a wiring harness here that pulls straight off like this. And now all the connectors are off of this. And now it's just simply undoing 2 Phillips screws on the top and 1 on the bottom. So you just need a screwdriver to take this off. I'm going to take off the screw on the bottom first, push into it pretty hard so you don't strip the threads. Wow. Gotta really push into this hard. This might be the original motor even. Feels like this has never been taken off. Okay, I got that first one out. Put the screw in here where I don't lose it. Now let me get the top two. Push really hard so you don't round off your Phillips screw there. All right, got the 2 screws. Need the last one right here. I'm gonna grab the motor so that it doesn't fall off after I get this last screw out. I'm gonna pull this off. This is the part of the motor that goes into the rotor. And here is the rotor here. It's sitting in this little groove. One problem that happens with rotors sometimes is this part where the motor goes into, after a lot of use, sometimes that gets rounded in there just from spinning it so many times. And if you have one that's rounded, your rotor is going to have some play in it, even when it's into the motor. And sometimes that causes vend issues where you might get a double vend or something. So you want to look at that. If that's really rounded, that hole, you might want to look into getting a new rotor. You have to buy the whole new rotor, which is about 50 bucks new. So here is the old motor, here is the new motor. The old one I had set in the 3 position on the cam. So I want to make sure this one is set into the same position, and notice it is set in the 3rd position. The cam is just not homed yet, but once I put power to it, it will home. So they're set right. Let's just put this one in. Okay, I want to line up the rotor with the motor opening and fit that in there. Then line up the holes, making sure not to put the motor bracket on top of any wires. And then I'm going to get my screw, fit it into my screwdriver, fit it in my screwdriver like so, and line it up and send it in there. Once you get 1 screw in there, it should be fairly easy, because then something's going to be supporting the motor. This helps if you have a magnetically charged screwdriver so that it kind of holds that screw as you put it into the opening. Don't make your screws too tight until you get all 3 of them lined up and in the holes. and then go back and tighten them all. This is the third screw. That's tight. Now I'll go down and tighten the bottom one. And the last top one. They're good and tight. Now I'm just going to put my connectors back in, the two top connectors on the motor, and then the bottom harness on the switch. You want to make sure these are on. If your connectors look like they might have some corrosion on them, you can use contact cleaner on these. You also want to make sure none of the wires are broken, that they're all tight on there, because that could be another potential problem right there, your wiring harnesses. One way to troubleshoot where your problem is, if you have time, is you take components off a good motor and then you put them on the problem motor. So if I thought it was the switch but I wasn't sure, I could remove the switch from one of the other motors and put it here and see if that fixes the problem. Before I put product back in the machine, I am going to power it back up because the rotor is not in the right position to put the product into it because this motor wasn't homed before I put it in there, so I had to rotate the rotor sort of it's at a 90-degree angle. So I'm gonna let the motor home, and then I'm gonna put the products back in. I'm gonna close the door switch, and it should get this motor to home. There it goes, it homed. It went back until the contact switch went into the first opening, and then it turned off the motor, which is exactly what it should do. Now we're going to put some products in there. When you're putting products in these Dixie Narcos, the caps go to the back. Tops of products on the Dixie Narcos, they always go to the back. When you get the products in, close this gate. And I'm not going to cover this up yet. I'm going to do some vends. You have to do what is called priming the columns on these Dixie Narcos. When it's completely empty like that, if somebody comes along and vends, they're going to get a dry vend. The rotor is going to spin, the machine's going to think it vended because it doesn't have a drop sensor on it. When that rotor spins and it falls into the next opening, it assumed it vended. But I got to get products in the rotor, so you have to do what is called priming it, where you got to do a couple vends. I could either go into the test motor mode in the circuit board and have it test vend, or I could just throw money in the machine. I think I'm just going to throw money in the machine and have it go through the vends. Another benefit of throwing money in the machine is you're testing the other components of the machine, the bill acceptor, the coin acceptor. I'll vend a couple different ways, and you're making sure the machine is working the way it should. So let's put in $1. This water is $1, so it's not going to give me any change. Now I'm going to press this. It's going to spin the motor, but I know it's not going to vend because the machine isn't primed. It's saying it's vending. I heard it complete the cycle. It fell into the home position. Nothing came out, which is what I expected because the products weren't in the rotor yet. So let's do another one. Put 4/4 in. Let's do another vend of the water. Probably is not going to give me anything on this one either. Oh no, it did. We're good. There we go. Let's vend it one more time, just to play it safe. And I'll actually let you watch the motor as I vend it. All right, so I'm putting in my 4/4 again. And I'm pressing the Deer Park selection. And there we go. We completed the vend. The water fell out. Looks like it's working. perfectly like a new Vend motor should. So now that I'm sure that the motor is working, I'm going to put the cover back on. One thing to keep in mind, if you're working on a single price machine, it's a completely different system. It's feeding power from the coin mech, and not only is there 120 volts going to the motor, there's 120 volts going to these switches, so there's a lot of high voltage in there. So if you have a single price older Dixie Narco machine, absolutely, definitely unplug that power before you go fiddling around with any of these components. Otherwise you're going to get yourself a big shock. But here we go. To get these back on, you start underneath the tab, pull it up on these plastic tabs, get it in there, just like that. And I'll put my water bottle back in there. Always remember to close your gate so that the products don't fall out on you. And close her up. There we go. So hopefully now you know how to change a Vend motor on a Dixie Narco stack machine. And as always, happy vending.